Alright, and welcome to angles formed by two vertices, level 3. Now, example 1 says this. We want to find the measure of angle HEI. And that's kind of what we've been doing in the previous problems. However, this problem is actually going to be kind of done in reverse. Now, what have I said? I want you to always start by finding the subtended arc that both vertices share. In this case, it looks like that's going to be this one right here, this arc FG. Now let me go ahead and switch to these two different colors, and I would have you actually take your pencil and really kind of highlight these things so that they really stand out to you. We know we have this angle right here, and you should be able to identify whether that's a vertex inside, on, or outside of the circle. And then of course we also have this vertex right there, and once again you should be able to identify, is that vertex inside, on, or outside of the circle. Well, interestingly enough, I actually noticed that I know this angle right here. And what did you decide? Was this a vertex in, on, or outside? And of course, this is a case of a vertex that is on the circle, which implies we want to use this formula right here. The measure of angle 1 equals 1/2 arc x. Well, what do I know? In this case, I actually know the angle, and I know it's the angle because A, it's at the vertex, and B, these two lines come together forming a sharp point. So I'll simply write 56 equals 1/2 arc x. Now this is different than how we've seen this formula before, but it doesn't change our first step. Right here we're trying to get the x by itself, and so the question becomes, how do I get rid of this 1/2? We know that the opposite of 1/2 is to multiply by 2. And of course, those two things cancel out. Now, when I multiply the right side by 2, well, I have to multiply the left side by 2. And we know that 2 times 56 will actually give us 112 degrees. And this is our arc x. Now, let me go ahead and switch to red because this is how I've coded this arc. So this whole thing right now is 112 degrees. Well, then this brings us to our next question, which is, what is that vertex right there? We know that we would label this as a vertex that is outside the circle. And the reason, of course, that that's important is it tells us what formula to use. So let's go ahead and write that. The measure of angle 1 equals 1/2 parentheses. Remember, arc x is always your large arc, and when it's a vertex outside of the circle, well, this is the case where we subtract the two arcs. Now, I always want to be asking myself, what information do I have? And I know that actually my large arc is going to equal 112 minus, and here we see the small arc is 31. And of course, that means we don't know the angle. So I'll still go ahead and write measure angle 1. Now in this case, what I would do is I would follow my order of operations. I would simplify what's inside the parentheses first, and pulling up my calculator, because we don't want to make any mistakes here, we'll say, okay, well, 112 minus 31, and that's actually going to give us 1/2 parentheses 81, and this is the measure of angle 1. Now we discussed this in earlier videos, that when you have two things side by side, they're being multiplied, and so we know that 81 times 1/2, or 0.5 if you're using your calculator at home, well, that's going to give us 40.5 degrees. And so let's go ahead and fill that in. We have 40.5 degrees, and that's my angle right there. Now, as always, I'd encourage you to pause this video, finish writing down your notes, and we are good. All right, now taking a look at example 2. Example 2 is actually asking us to find the measure of JE, or more specifically, arc JE. So I look right here, and this I believe is actually the first arc that we've been asked to find, and so that's what we're looking for. And in fact, actually I kind of want to take that away, because even though we're looking for arc JE, I first want to identify what is the subtended arc that both of my vertices share, because I think this one's a little bit harder to see. So let's take a look right here. See, this arc right here, GF, is actually formed by two separate arcs. We have our first one. We have this vertex right here at J, and ask yourself, is that vertex that's inside, on, or outside the circle? And then switching to this gold that we've been using, we also see, well, we actually have this line and that line, and those form another vertex here at H. So the question then becomes, what are these vertices that we are dealing with? Well, I see right here when I look at J, I notice that J is on the circle, so we'll call this a vertex on. And of course, that's going to imply we use this formula that you should be very familiar with now. The measure of angle 1 is equal to 1/2 arc x. Now we ask ourselves, what is that 56 degrees? Is it an angle or is it an arc? And we notice that it's at the vertex, or we could say, hey, these two lines form a sharp point, and that is our angle symbol. So I'll write 56 equals 1/2 arc x. Now, next we want to ask ourselves, well, hey, how do I get rid of that 1/2? How do I get x by itself? And of course, we resort back to our trick of multiplying both sides by 2. Yeah, absolutely. And so we multiply both sides by 2. We, of course, cross out the 2 and the 1/2 there. And 2 times 56 will, in fact, give us 112 degrees, equals arc x. Now, from here, I know, and let me switch back to red, that this arc right here is, my apologies, is 112 degrees. So no, hey, that's 112 degrees. And then we want to ask ourselves, well, how does that apply to this vertex right here at H? And firstly, we have to know, is that vertex inside, on, or outside? And of course, we know that this is what we would call a vertex that is inside the circle. Well, let's go ahead and write our formula for a vertex inside. It's the measure of angle 1 equals 1/2 parentheses. And ask yourself, if it's a vertex that is inside, do you think that we should be adding or subtracting these two arcs? And of course, the answer is we should add. Now let's go ahead and fill in all the things that we know. We know that at the vertex, our angle is going to be 74 degrees. So we have 74 equals 1/2 parentheses. I see my larger arc is this 112 plus arc y, which at this point we still don't know. So if I'm trying to get arc y by itself, well, first we have to get rid of the 1/2. And once again, ask yourself, what is the opposite of 1/2? In this case, of course, we use the same trick as earlier. We'll multiply both sides times 2, so those cancel. And we know that 2 times 74 would actually be 148 equals 112 plus arc y. Now, kind of relating back to, I believe, more so our first video than our second, when we have a positive 112, to get rid of that, of course, we'll use a negative minus 112. And it appears 8 minus 2 will be 6, 4 minus 1 is 3, and of course, we're going to get this. Arc y is equal to 36 degrees. I can even go ahead and write that right there, 36 degrees for arc JE. Alright, well, I hope this video helps, and I